My name is Janice. If you weren't in the Q&A session number 1 or heard from us via email, I am with the National Institute of Aerospace, and we will do a couple of introductions here in a little bit, but I want to welcome you to this Q&A session. It will be a good opportunity to talk with our co-chairs, and we actually have a couple members of our judging panel on this call as well. And it will be a great opportunity to ask any remaining questions that you might have with this final touch point between you and the co-chairs. Just a reminder that if you do have any remaining questions after this session, you can always email them to blueskies@nianet.org, and we'll provide that email address at the end of this presentation for you. But Amy, if you'll go to the next slide, we'll take a look at our agenda. Like I said, this session will be recorded and posted on the Blue Skies website, and it looks like everyone that is in here, I think, has muted their mics. So just make sure you do keep those muted until you do have a question. It will be in an open call format. So be prepared to raise your hand in the Teams application and we'll call on you. You can turn on your video and microphone, ask your question. You can also post a question in the chat. And Amy and I will kind of keep an eye on the chat just to make sure that we get everything answered. Once the questions are asked and answered at 4:30 or before, we'll wrap things up. So just kind of an overview of how this session will go. And then we'll go to the next slide and take a look at our team. We'll run through some quick introductions of our team. So again, if you kind of want a little bit more of an overview of who we are, you can go to our Q&A session number 1. We're kind of going to gloss over a lot of the stuff that we did in the Q&A session number 1, just for redundancy's sake and to kind of give you the most time that you need to answer to ask some of these questions that you might have. So real quickly, this is our National Institute of Aerospace program management team. You'll primarily interact with Amy McCluskey and myself. You see us here on the call. That's Amy waving her hand. And then our finalist teams, once selected and go to the end of May forum, will meet Stacy and Shelley, along with another one of our team members, Genevieve Eberly. And together we work really hard to make this competition successful for NASA, and we also like to have fun. So we're very much looking forward to getting to know you during this competition, and we're looking forward to seeing your proposals. So next slide, we'll take a look at our University Innovation Project team. This competition, Gateways to Blue Skies, is sponsored by the UI project within NASA's Aerospace Research Mission Directorate. And I know Stephen is on this call. Stephen, do you want to make a quick introduction to yourself and your role with this competition?
Sure, yeah. I guess technically on the NASA side, I'm the creator of Blue Skies. Of course, I had the help of the NIA team, which I couldn't have done it without them. And I run our Blue Skies on the NASA end with a number of other opportunities that we have, such as University Student Research Challenge and some of our other UI portfolio items. But yeah, I have perpetually been one of the co-sponsored judges. This year, I also have with me Marcus, who is in the call, serving as a co-lead judge. So I'm hearing myself on a reverb. Someone has their mic open.
Hold on. I've closed it. All right. I think we might have muted them. Go ahead, Stephen.
All right. Yep. So I'm one of the 2 co-lead judges this year, and so we always happy that you all are showing up and submitting. If you all weren't having a good time in this competition, we wouldn't do it. So we're always trying to make improvements too. So feel free to reach out, after the competition, if you want to reach out about that. Always happy to talk about non-competition stuff as well if you want to reach out professionally. Of course, I can't help your team do things differently, give you an advantage on the competition. So always happy to chat.
Perfect. Thank you, Stephen. And just as heads up, since we're going to Ames, and that's where Kaushik and Meena are based, you will very likely see them at the forum for the teams that are selected as finalists.
I'm actually, he hasn't done it yet.
I haven't done it yet. Sorry.
Just a reminder, everyone.
Professor Mapati said I have presentation, so I was preparing for it.
Please, I think I got it. Just a reminder to mute your mic if you're here in the call. So we'll move on to our judging panel. And this is a new bit of information for anyone who attended our Q&A session number 1. So these are the folks who our finalists will interact with at the forum. And these are the folks who will be judging your proposals when they come in here in about a month. And Marcus, I know you have your camera on. Can you please give a quick introduction to yourself? And then we'll kind of go on to the rest of the judging panel who are here in attendance.
Yeah, hello, my name is Marcus Johnson. I am the project manager for a new effort under NASA Aeronautics called Advanced Capabilities for Emergency Response Operations. And this project is focused on trying to incorporate aviation technology into disaster emergency response operations, specifically looking at wildland firefighting and how can we use technologies like automation, like drones, new communications architectures, advanced traffic management systems like UAS traffic management to improve the effectiveness, the safety of wildland firefighting, specifically looking around how to do suppression with remotely piloted aircraft. So I'm happy to be a judge this year and co-chair with Steve, and looking forward to seeing all the great ideas you guys have.
Awesome. Thank you, Marcus. And I know I think Travis is on this call and Jay is on this call. Do you guys want to make a quick introduction to yourselves since you're here?
Sure, I'll go first. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Travis Potter, the UAS and Remote Sensing Coordinator for FEMA Region 4. I'm very much looking forward to the submissions and good luck.
Thank you, Travis. And Jay, do you want to say a quick word?
Yeah, hi everybody. Sorry, I'm off camera. I'm traveling right now, but glad to be on the call and part of the competition as a judge, and look forward to seeing all the great solutions.
Perfect. And so those are a couple of folks that that will be looking at your proposals. They are amazing subject matter experts in aviation and natural disasters and bring incredible expertise to thoroughly evaluate your proposed concepts, and they are also an enthusiastic bunch. So as they said, we and they are eager to see what ideas you bring in with your proposals. So let's take a look at our next slide. Again, glossing kind of a little bit over some of our different pieces of the competition, I do want to go ahead and invite Marcus and Stephen to kind of do a high-level overview of the competition, kind of higher level than what we did in November. And then again, we'll have this recording available. And if you want to go more in depth, you can take a look at that Q&A session 1. So Stephen, do you want to take a minute to frame this year's competition for the questions that we'll have here today? And then Marcus, you can chime in as well.
Sure. Kind of building off of what Marcus said, the work that is already being done in NASA Aero with regards to disaster response. We know that they hope to expand in the future beyond just wildfire. And so we wanted to get ideas. We wanted to get you all, who will be some of the people working on this in the future, thinking about, how can we do this? What are the phases that we could focus on? What technologies can we incorporate, and how can we affect all of the different type of disasters that we deal with beyond wildfire? Not that wildfire isn't an option as well. And so that's kind of the background for how we, thought about going forward with this year. And so we do ask you, as part of this competition, to conceptualize applications of new and existing capabilities and using aviation platforms to aid in a specified phase of a natural disaster of your choosing, both the phase and the natural disaster, and hopefully improving the response of that phase. And so, we asked you to do that through a paper, and of which have really good guidelines, very thorough guidelines online of what we would like to see. But unlike some other competitions you might see or reports you have to do, you are limited in the page space that you have to tell us about your idea. And so we really want to see from a high level, what are you doing, the justifications and background behind that, and kind of a high level plan and ConOps for what your system really is going to be, a high systems level view of your solution. That's all I have.
I didn't know if that was the handoff to jump in. I did just want to say, at a very high level, there is a growing challenge around natural disasters in the country, not just our country, but the world really. A lot of this is driven by kind of a changing climate, and there are a lot of new technologies out there, and new technologies that can be developed and invented as well. So we do really encourage you to think outside the box for this competition. A lot of the disaster response operations are still working with reliable equipment, but somewhat old technology. And so I think there's ample opportunity really to make a big difference in the way we respond, we prepare for natural disasters, we respond to them, and even after natural disasters, how we better, understand situations, environments, ecosystems, to really understand the risk for the next disaster that's going to come around in that area. So, it's a growing problem. It's an area of interest that's going to affect your life sometime in the future. It's may have affected some of your lives already. And so, please think big ideas, but then try to make them practical, make them something that can be really deployable, something that can be realized. This is really your guys' moment to come up with some new concepts and new ideas.
Perfect. Thank you guys very, very much. And Amy, we'll move to the next slide. Before we dive into our questions, I will go over a couple of quick things to remember as you're preparing your proposal in video. Just as a reminder, your competition guidelines are the primary guide you'll use for your proposal. So make sure you pay careful attention to the theme and the proposal itself and what the requirements are. It's pretty clear in terms of what the judges will be looking for in terms of their evaluation. So you should have a good guide in those competition guidelines. And because your proposal page allotment is small, you'll want to stay pretty high level in your analysis. So judges will be looking for you to show a good understanding of the current natural disaster landscape, including the operational environment in which your system will be deployed. There are different facets of implementation, including the end user. So it's important to kind of consider all these different things and address those considerations in your proposal. Judges will be looking for decisive proposals with good justification for their use case and implementation strategy. So make sure you pay attention to some of those different things that we do want to see in the competition. And also, it's important to remember that new technology can be interesting and flashy, but it doesn't always stand on its own. So the idea of this competition is to sort of figure out examine your concept, be it the new technology, existing technology that's not yet deployed, or any combination thereof, and examine how it can close the gaps that exist in current disaster management efforts. That is kind of the key of this competition, is how we can kind of close some of those gaps and modernize. So some teams have also asked about prototypes. Prototypes are not needed for this competition. Again, it's important to stay high level in your concept discussion. And again, detailed aircraft design studies are also not necessarily something that we want to see in this competition. And I'd like to invite Stephen and Marcus to clarify or add anything else to this list that you guys might be thinking of.
I think that's most of it. We're always happy to answer specifics that don't fit into this list as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yep,
I would agree. Yeah.
If you have any questions, be sure to reach out to us on that. So with that, just a few more reminders. Remember that your faculty advisor must sign your proposal. So plan ahead for this to be completed. Also, one thing that we do encounter with the Blue Skies competition is the W-9 and vendor form kind of posing problems for some of our teams. So plan ahead, once again, to identify the correct person at your university to complete and sign that W-9 or vendor form, whichever one you use. The individual does need to be a representative of your university, typically through the finance department or the Office of Sponsored Programs or something similar. Your advisor should be able to guide you in the right direction. As a reminder, we can only issue stipend checks directly to the colleges and universities that we're working with. We cannot send them to individuals or individual student organizations. So make sure that the point of contact that you provide on your proposal submission form is going to be the person who will receive the funds, should your team be selected as a finalist. Your advisor will then work with that individual that receives the check to distribute the funds according to your university's policies and kind of where it needs to go so that it can support each team's finalists' participation in the culminating forum. So if you have any questions on that, now is a great time to ask, and we'll do the best we can. And of course, we're available. We want to encourage you to plan ahead on that front. And remember that your research and justification are the keys to your success. You are essentially selling your proposed concept to the judges. So consider that when you're writing your proposal. It's a great way to kind of frame your proposal as you're preparing it for submission. And again, one more thing, the competition guidelines do have a notable change you'll want to keep in mind. There aren't any changes other than this one. And that is to make sure that you have a high resolution, high fidelity image of all or part of your concept submitted with your proposal or video. So you should be preparing this to include in your quad chart, but you will need a high resolution version of it. And primarily this is going to be used in website feature stories, any focal points that we might have online. And so kind of think of it as that way. Your image or graphic is really up to your discretion, but it should be sort of a depiction of what your concept is from the outside viewer. And we want to make sure that this isn't distracting from your proposal. The proposal and video are the most important things, but we just wanted to highlight that here and make sure you're aware that that is a change if you haven't seen it. And that will also be a requirement for our finalist teams when you submit your technical papers in May. So just kind of keep that in mind. And we always welcome photos of your teams working. We've seen some great images of folks out on the tarmac at airports and, doing research in real time, working with subject matter experts. And so if you have any photos like that, we're always eager to have those as well. So.
Yeah. And I have to say one comment when I saw hands up as well. The one quick comment, right? I mean, the whole purpose of this competition is to start hearing all the ideas from the students. So we really want the students' original ideas. Your faculty serve as great mentors and guides, but they're there to kind of guide you. Hey, this is how you do research. This is how you put together, an appropriate story. Your mentors aren't necessarily the first place you want to go to start saying, hey, what should we do? What should our project be, right? I think the whole reason that you're going into the fields that you're going to and doing competitions like this is because you want to be able to solve problems. And so that's something we're asking you to do.
Thank you for that, Stephen. And Ania, it looks like you have a question.
Hi, yeah, I do have a question. So thank you for the summary of the things that we'll need to do throughout the competition. One of my questions is for the W-9 vendor form, that goes through the university accounting or finance department, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then on top of that, what is the I think you just mentioned it, the 300 DPI photo or graphic, is that something that we create that just visually shows what our concept or idea is, or is it like the video that needs to be in that format?
Separate from the video. separate from the video. So the graphic will be part of your quad chart, and we're asking for a high resolution version of that as well. And yes, it is meant to in a quick, easy to view format. And if you have any questions on that, you could feel free to reach out to myself or.
Okay. Thank you.
I think that that kind of image, kind of a ConOps in a picture type of thing, it tends to be a really good starting point for what people start to think of for their infographic for the finalist teams, right? If you had to show somebody in one picture visually, hey, this is kind of what our idea is, then I'm assuming that's kind of what Janice wants to be able to showcase, and it will also help prepare the finalist teams for their infographic, which is a little bit more detailed.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's a great point. And yeah, it will be a good jumping off point for your infographic. But this is kind of, imagine you are selected as a finalist and someone's taking a look at your concept and they want to see it just visually. It's sort of that.
Lost you for a second, Janice.
Yeah,
I think you got cut out. I didn't hear like.
Yeah.
The
past which part?
So you started talking about what it was, and then it cut out right when you were about to say what the picture is used for.
It looks like we're having some technical difficulties.
Okay, looks like I'm back. You gotta love technical difficulties. So, sorry, yeah, you cut out when you were asking that question. I think what I was in the middle of saying is that you kind of want to take a snapshot of what your concept is and try to convey that visually for someone who might be an outsider looking in, reading a web article or something like that.
Okay, so on that picture, so we should probably limit the amount of words we use, or probably have no words at all, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
You'll save your words for the infographic. All right. Well, moving along, and I apologize for my technical difficulties. Just want to highlight, as you see here on this slide, that you're very aware of your next deadline being the proposal and video submissions deadline of February 27th. And if, like I said before, if you have any questions beyond this session, feel free to email us and we'll answer them or get answers to them from our co-chairs. Finalist selections will be made by March 26th, and finalists will have the next few months to prepare their final research paper infographic and develop a presentation. And of course, as you all know, the forum will be in Mountain View, California on May 30th and 31st. So just a kind of preview of some of the deadlines to come. So just a couple of existing resources. I'm not going to go through these, but you can kind of take a look at these as you go, as you're preparing your proposal. And with that, we will jump into our questions. So if anyone has a question, feel free to raise your hand and we will call on you. Or like I said, you can pop them in the chat as well. And as we're waiting for folks to get started, I do have a couple of questions that have come in that might be worth asking in front of the group. So Stephen and Marcus wondered if you could share a little bit about how you envision these teams balancing their innovation with feasibility, because we've talked a lot about looking ahead into the future. So how will these elements be judged and what's your guidance on some of those things?
So yeah, I do think we try to balance it out in how we assign points, right? I think one reason why we encourage students both this year, last year, and previous years to pick energy sources or technologies for this year, or different disasters that aren't the most popular ones that you could find, or maybe not just wildfire, because it's easy to find, is because we really want to see that innovation, right? So we want to see things that I couldn't just Google overnight, because you put your creativity into it and put your both research and kind of creativity behind it. So we really do want that innovation, and I think that's really important to us as a forward-looking agency, right? But sometimes you do see people suggest things that are a little bit far out there, right? And so we definitely want you to. The whole point of this is to also ground it in reality, right? We did give a nearer time frame than some of our previous years, so it kind of limits some of the more farther out technology that you might be able to look at. Of course, we put in the guidelines to think about things like cost, right? How easy it is to train people on this, right? If you develop a system and it's too complicated or too expensive for anyone to use, then that kind of defeats the purpose of what we're going for, right? We really want this to be something that maybe one of the judges will see, or maybe someone in the public will see, and they'd be like, hey, it's a good idea. Maybe we should look into that, or maybe that Marcus's team could use in a couple of years, or someone from one of our agencies, or maybe the students even go further with their ideas afterwards, right? We do kind of want that realness to it, but we don't want students to limit themselves to basically what is already out there.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think one of the things to keep in mind is as you're ideating and coming up with your concepts, you should continually be challenging your concepts against just the assumptions and your understanding of kind of the conditions that these technologies need to work in. I think that's, even simple solutions may be a very groundbreaking solution for, once you start applying the constraints and of the environment and of the operations that these technologies need to work in. So, I think, as we're looking through, there is a bit of a balancing act that you're doing between coming up with new ideas. You can try to take technologies from other fields and repurpose them in ways that haven't been used before. And trying to balance that, okay, we're trying to innovate here with, oh yeah, these are environments that may have challenges with connectivity. These are environments that, the equipment needs to be very highly ruggedized, right? These are environments in which the training requirements might need to be pretty low because, you're not going to have your PhD out there necessarily, debugging things as problems come up. So, as you're kind of working through your problem, make sure you fully appreciate the environment in which these technologies need to work in, not just now, but sometime in the future as the problem may continue to get worse, and challenge your ideas as you're going through that process. And again, you may find as you're going through that sometimes innovation may be smaller steps than these huge leaps of the swarm of drones blanketing the sky, right? So I think trying to get that balancing act and do some good analysis on your ideas is probably the best advice that I can give.
Awesome. Those are great answers. We do have another question in the chat about UML models used as graphics for showcasing our concept. And I'll let you guys chime in a little bit, but I think we're looking for something a little bit more graphical, something that's a little bit more of an image depiction of it as opposed to words. If you guys would like to.
I think some of the inspiration behind that is that, right, if someone passing by sees it, or right, someone sees the image on the website, they're like, oh wait, wait a second, what is that, right? And it might grab someone who's not necessarily going to stop when they see a large research poster title type of thing, right? They see an image and they say, wait, let me learn more about that. And sometimes I guess the more flowchart type or more PowerPoint slide type of things don't grab people as much, right? And we because this is such a topic that affects so many people, we really want things that pull people in, get them involved, and get them working towards these solutions.
Yeah, I would kind of agree with all that's been said. It's an opportunity for storytelling. right? And we want to make sure that you're telling your story as effectively as you can. You have one image to tell what your whole concept is about, and UML, some boxes and lines may not fully articulate an entire story and its potential impact. So just think a little bit about some artistic storytelling as you're trying to put those images together.
And to add to that, if you haven't seen it before, Marcus actually had a great slide in the Q&A session number 1 that articulated kind of how the Acero project is being deployed or is intended to be deployed. And that might be a good sort of jumping off point. Brian S. asked whether it is more so an artist depiction image of how the solution might look. And that is another good kind of guidepost to go from, of either an image portion of what the technology might look like or how it might be deployed. Let's see if there are any other questions of this. Yep, and Stephen, I see that you answered that question in the chat a little bit. And yep, thank you, Marcus, for putting that in there. All right, so it looks like Eugene has a question about what implementation timeframe are we looking for? 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 50. Our solution may require stages that depend on the regulations, and we know that regulations in aviation take time. So let's talk about that first, and then we'll talk about the other part of his question.
Yeah, that was a good question, right? I mean, we did aim in the I believe the guidelines for 2035, right? There, if we say 2035 and it takes 50 years to get into place, that kind of doesn't make a lot of sense for us, right? These are near-term problems, which is why we moved the timeline down from maybe our typical 2040, 2050, and so we really want this to be sooner than later. Obviously, regulation does take time to change. I'm sure you could probably do some interesting research. There's probably videos of Marcus out there talking even about how they work with some of the people who put out some of these regulations and local authorities, wildfire people, et cetera, to start making changes now for the future, right? So I know they're working on changes now, and so you can do your research, make your assumptions. Hey, maybe this is the timeline for regulation changes by implementation, right? These and the regulations probably will change depending on what kind of system you're using, right? Or what your application is. And so it might be different for everybody what their time frame is on all of that. Marcus, do you want to add on to that before I go on to the budget part of their question?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head there. One of the things that as you're going through, if you have a part of your concept which is maybe not supported by regulation, highlight that. Talk about some of the limitations of your concept, right? If this regulation had this enabling factor, it may open the door for this concept, right? That's an equal part of your analysis. Now, if you're finding that there's so many regulatory barriers that you're hitting that the concept really isn't feasible, right? Then maybe that's also telling. But I don't think anything that we do is going to have barriers around it. Regulatory barriers are often one of the areas that we're always having to battle against. If we didn't have regulatory barriers in place, we would have already done it, right? So I think to some extent, just as you're doing your analysis against your concept, you're highlighting, hey, these are the areas that are impacted by regulation. Sometimes the regulation doesn't need to change; it just needs to be the compliance against it needs to be established. And so just again, as you're looking at your concept, really take some time to think through, what regulations would be enabling, what regulations would be prohibiting, and is there ways in which the regulation doesn't support it now, but if we can show that it's safe, it could support it in a couple of years, right? All of that I think feeds into the overall picture of the feasibility and the practicality of the concept.
Thanks. Yeah, and the next part of that question, which asks about if they need to do a estimate for required budget, create a project plan. We don't expect to read budget plans. I think I think in general, and we can probably put it in there, timelines can be nice to see, right? Saying, hey, this is maybe a technology timeline, a development timeline, or regulation timeline, whatever you need to put into your specific one. Timelines are nice to see. We don't expect to see a specific budget, but I think you do need to justify its feasibility, right? If you're using some sort of $20 million Hail UAV platform, and you need 7 of them, and it's going to be run by local firefighters, and right, I think there needs to be some, hey, is this possible, right? Where would people even get this sort of money, even in the case of some sort of government handout, right? There is also a feasibility to how expensive of a system are you going to put into place, its usability, etc.
Yeah, just agreeing with that, right? Don't worry about the implementation budget of you running a project. Think about the acquisition cost for an agency that needs to buy and operate this thing. And costs should factor into the feasibility of it, but we're not necessarily looking for a budget on any sort of detailed budget on how you'd actually execute it.
Perfect, thank you. So we do have another question. It was mentioned that we need high-level systems, but not detailed design. Could you give an example or elaborate on when we are crossing the lines of detailed design? And this is a good question.
Yeah, and I would say we don't need to see CAD drawings. You probably don't need to model your thing in VSB Aero, but although that might help you make a nice, pretty picture, and is probably good to learn on the side. If you're designing electrical systems, if you're designing the wing, and those types of level of detail we're not asking for, right? We want something that is flyable, yeah, but we're not expecting you necessarily to design the airplane itself, right? You might say, hey, these are capabilities that are out there, or capabilities that might be near term. What can you put on those sort of capabilities that will be useful to the problem that we're trying to solve? So I don't know if that is a good enough answer, but.
Well, and you mentioned CAD drawings too, Stephen. You may have read, those participants may have read that in the guidelines, we do say that a picture is worth 1,000 words. So if it is easier to not easier, but if it's more effective to convey your concept using illustrations, then that is certainly welcome. That said, as Stephen pointed out, it is not a requirement of the competition to have a physical prototype or a CAD model. It's not something that you can't do, but you do need to prioritize the elements of the written proposal and the video as you're submitting your proposal, because that's essentially what the competition is about. And can you convey the concept to the judges using that written proposal? And so that's what we would encourage you to focus on, is making sure that your 5 to 7 pages and no more, because the judges are not required to read beyond 7 pages, conveys your concept in the most effective manner.
And quickly touching back on that, I know we have a lot more questions to get to. The vehicle is, if whatever vehicle or method you're using for the aerial part, is only a small piece of the puzzle, right? There's a lot of human pieces to this puzzle. There's a lot of other pieces, right? And so it's not an aircraft design competition. So right, that's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, I was going to throw something similar in there, right? You need to make sure you articulate the operation, the workflow, how that particular contribution of technology works to accomplish certain tasks. And so any design is going to be somewhat of a system of systems, and it's going to probably involve humans interacting with those systems. And so describing how different parts of those system of systems kind of interact with each other, how they're supposed to interact with the humans. I mean, you're describing kind of that concept at a higher level system design, as opposed to telling me what the information elements of a API are, right? And what information specifically is flowing from one system to one system, or a system specification. We don't need that level of detail.
And quickly touching on the next question, which Janice answered in the chat about, can your 2-minute video be shorter than 2 minutes? Yeah, you can make it shorter than 2 minutes, but if you had a 30-second video, would you feel confident going against other people's 2-ish minute videos? If you're basically giving us an introduction to who your group is and an elevator pitch of your concept, right? 2 minutes is not a lot of time once you start doing it. And right, it is worth a decent amount of points. And so we really want to be able to kind of hear that elevator pitch for your system and maybe visualize it, right? See it and see you all as well. So I would say it's definitely advantageous to use the time to get everything across. If you can get it across in 30 seconds, that's up to you all. So
perfect. Thank you for answering that one, Stephen. And I think we answered Samuel's question about the physical prototypes and CAD models. If you have any clarifications further than that, Samuel, just let us know. And then we have another question from Eugene. Our solution already has FAA approved solution, or FAA is, I assume it's FAA approved, but is not yet mandatory. And it may take time until manufacturers will implement it, though 2035 is feasible, so probably faster. So Eugene, did you want to ask a question on that, or was that just sort of a clarification on the conversation that we had before that? If you're not ready to turn on your mic, or if you're not here anymore, then you can clarify that in the chat.
Yes, can you hear me?
Perfect.
Okay, no, it was just clarification at the time when I received the answer about the timeline. So it's absolutely perfect. 2035 is feasible, yes.
Works for us. Sounds
Thanks.
good. Thank you for clarifying. We will go to this next question, and then Ania, I'll call on you. Thank you for raising your hand. So we do have one more in the chat. Building on the detailed design question, how much weight would we put on how our idea interacts with end users, environment, affected communities, other systems, etc.? It's another good question on how to balance all of the things that the proposal is asking for.
So I do think this. You can go ahead. You can go, Marcus. I've been talking a lot.
No, I was, I don't think there's like a magic answer to this, right? I think not considering those aspects in it will make a weak proposal. Over analyzing it, you probably don't have the real estate in your proposal to really bring in all the ideas and considerations. So it's a bit of an art. I think you do need to factor in how users are going to be using these systems. You have to consider the environment in which it works. It's all part of a feasibility assessment. So I would not discount those things within your proposal, but also don't use the 90% of your real estate building up the problem, because we still need to hear the solution. So it's a bit of an art. I think there's not a clear cut. You need to have so much percentage. I think you'll have to kind of balance. You have to balance what is important out of the user interactions, the environment, the impacted communities, other systems, and making sure you're highlighting those important features and where it's actually making change at and where it could be disruptive at. Sorry, Steve, if I stepped on you.
You're good.
Oh, Dennis, I think you're on mute.
Thank you.
No, I just said you're good. I think you answered it.
Perfect. No, and it is an art. There is really no clear-cut answer to how to write your proposal. So it's going to be up to each team's discretion on how to exactly balance those different things. Ania, you had a question.
Yeah, so my question is about the body paragraph the body of the proposal. So points 3 and 4 are conceptualize the implementation and then chart a path to deployment. So could you explain further about the conceptualizing the implementation, like what sort of things you're looking for? I know they have like a part of tips, but if you could explain some of the things that we should be sure to include in the conceptualization, that would be great.
And if you look actually at your competition guidelines, if you kind of scroll up a little bit to the competition theme description and details, which is on your page 5 of the paginated PDF, there are a couple of bullet points in there, and I can copy those over into our chat so that everyone has easy reference to those. And I will once I put these in here, I'll let Stephen and Marcus talk a little bit more about these different things.
So if I understood your question correctly, what I would say to the question is, right, basically you want to set your vision in the sense of, hey, this is what we're trying to accomplish. This is ideally how it would operate, right, in its end state. Obviously, you can't just implement that in one day, right? There's gonna have to be a path of, hey, maybe there are some pieces of technology that are still finishing being developed, or maybe there are regular things like people mentioned before, right? End users or regulations that will have to come into place for all of these things to work out. Maybe there's training, right? Maybe you're working with disaster response folk that will be using it or interfacing with it, right? And so it's one thing to say, hey, this is my idea. Isn't it great? It's another thing to say, how do we get there?
So overall, I think like the competition is kind of like a proposal idea where you take like innovative ideas and try to turn them into a reality. I think that's what I kind of got from the overall competition.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of thinking of it, right? I think when you look at the problem that you're choosing, you need to get a good understanding of what do they have now and what's preventing them from using something more modern, better, something that's out there. Or is there, they're using the latest and greatest, but could it be done better? And often what I think you'll see is this list covers a number of areas of well, this is the reason that they don't use something different. So your idea needs to kind of consider these and try to overcome that, right? Sometimes, I think if you do get an opportunity to talk with any folks in your local community that are supporting wildland fire and emergency response or any of these disaster responses, sometimes you'll hear common things like cost, right? But it's not always a cost barrier. What we've seen is sometimes it's like trust in the technology, right? Something that's overly complicated may be very difficult for people to learn quickly, and they don't have a lot of cycles to pick up on a new technology. Likewise, I think again, in addition to this list, just kind of getting an understanding of if there's differences on what's used in various parts of the disaster that you chose, like different agencies have different solutions for the same problem, right? Sometimes that in of itself becomes a barrier because if things don't work together, you can never have this advancement that like helps everyone, achieve the next step if everybody can't communicate and it doesn't, none of the technologies speak the same languages. So I think again, this is a good place to start, but you have to really take a look at what is preventing innovation for the problem that you're trying to solve, preventing folks that are actually out in the field from actually realizing these solutions that they can make use of. And I think that'll be probably your biggest understanding of where the long pole in the tent is for trying to get new technology and new innovations into their hands.
Yeah.
Yeah, that answered my question. Thank you so much.
And that touches on the next question in the chat that asks about going into more detail on the bullet point that says team defined use case / opportunity for impact, right? And so the use case opportunity for impact is basically, right, what is the problem you're trying to solve, right? There's something that is a gap, right, in the capabilities or someone who's responding to it now that says, hey, wow, we could really make this response better or this phase better if only we had some, insert your idea here. Or capability here or something that could help that, right? And so there's a use case for the idea that you're coming up with. The part that says team defined is because we do want you all kind of innovating it, right? We don't want you to say, hey, what are 10 ideas I can find online and let me just pick one of those ideas. So we really, I'm not sure if that answers your question, Angel.
He said, yes, it does. And then kind of to further that, if y'all can talk a little bit about, Michael has a question about sort of the overlap of the implementation and the deployment. And absolutely, they are overlapped and related. They kind of flow into each other. And the goal is to sort of evaluate what your implementation would look like, and then sort of help chart a path, what that might look like. What are the steps that need to be taken to overcome some of those implementation pieces? And Marcus, I know you are unmuted and ready to talk about that one.
Right. Maybe I shouldn't have unmuted. Yeah, there is definitely overlap between those two terms. I tend to think that implementation is kind of your first instance on how do I start kind of building and getting this system into the hands of a emergency responder. But the deployment may look like, how do I actually scale it up? How do I account for different environmental conditions in different areas of the country this needs to be at? How do I consider training people? How do I consider, even where it's going to be at, right? The hazardous environment that it's going to be operating in, and if there's additional things that need to be considered for that. So implementation, again, from my standpoint, is kind of the start. Deployment looks more towards the back end of the life cycle of the technology, but I don't know if there's other Steve or anyone else has thoughts on that.
I think I can leave it there. There is an overlap. Some people might define it differently, right? So, I mean, if you define it differently, let us know how you're defining it.
That's a very good point. If you are interpreting something a little bit differently, it is good to say so in your proposal. And I'm not seeing any extra hands up or any other items in the chat. So I'll kind of pause here and give a quick minute in case there are any other questions. We are nearing the end of our session. So if there are none, we can kind of move on. Like I said, if y'all have any questions from now until February 27th, and preferably if you have questions, we encourage you to ask them about a week to 5 days ahead of time so that we have ample time to get with our co-chairs if needed, to get answers to you. So keep that in mind as you're planning. Feel free to email anything over to blueskies@naanet.org. And as Stephen and Marcus said, we're all more than willing to help you out as you're developing your proposals. We will do our best to get everything that is relevant to the larger group onto our frequently asked questions page for everyone to see. So check back on that. And we do very much wish you guys the best of luck as you're preparing your proposals. Once again, we're super excited to have you participating in this competition, and we're very excited to see what you come up with. And so I just want to thank Stephen and Marcus for taking the time to spend with you for this Q&A session, and as well as our other judges who tuned in. So thank you so much for everyone for joining us. And again, feel free to reach out. Good luck.